Hi there, and welcome to Yoga for Normal People. Like everyone else in the world, I occasionally struggle with some back pain, so today I decided to do a little sequence outside just to kind of loosen up. First things first, come onto your hands and knees and come into child's pose. Walk your right arm off your mat and take your left hand and pile it on top of your right. Interweaving your fingers and allowing your body to stretch open on the side. Imagine that you're sinking your hips down towards your heels and taking a few deep breaths, just letting the breath move you. Next, come on to all fours and do what I like to call a couple of barrel rolls. So here, just taking head towards tail on the left and the right, kind of wagging the tail, if you will, and hanging out in one side and then the other. And then moving just to extend the right leg back, press back through the Achilles tendon, and then switching legs, pressing back into the left leg. Come back into all fours and take a few moments here just to move through a nice, easy, organic cat-cow, really drawing the belly button towards the spine as you arch and really letting the belly hang low. For me, this actually feels really good, especially in my low back, so I hung out here for a little bit. A lot of my yoga practice is really about what feels good, so you'll see me try out a few things here and then readjust. Next, come into a wide-legged downward facing dog. So press your heels back towards the back of the mat and then alternately bend one knee and the other, just letting your hips shift left to right, maybe coming up on your toes. Here, I've taken my right hand and reaching for my left outside calf, just taking a little downward dog twist. I was pretty stiff in this pose, so you'll see that I don't get a lot of rotation, but it felt pretty good in my low back. And then when you're ready, walk your hands back to meet your feet. And here, we'll take a nice wide-legged forward fold, extending out long first, keeping a deep bend in the knees, and then just allowing the belly to come to rest on the thighs. You'll see that I take my blanket here and roll it up. This is going to be a prop for later on, but for right now I'm just going to keep it underneath my hands as sort of a way to bring the ground softly up towards me. Here you'll see I take a little ragdoll pose and let my hips shift from left to right. Once again, rocking back on my heels, lifting my toes, and then shifting my weight to the middle of my foot so that I'm not so much sinking back as I am sinking into the middle or forefoot. From here, take your rolled up blanket, place it across the pelvis, so right across the front of the hip bones, and then fold over that blanket, capturing it between the top of your thighs and your belly. This feels like a really good release across the low back. It allows the lower spine to expand. And as you breathe, you'll just find that your head can hang heavy and relax. Here I start to walk forward with my hands, shifting my weight into my toes, and then back, lifting my toes off the mat. Again, just changing the way that the stretch feels in my hamstrings in particular here. Turns out that my tight hamstrings have a tendency to bunch up my low back, so this felt really good this morning. Just remember to continue to move with your breath and take whatever modifications you may need. Next, walk your hands out and come back into a downward facing dog. Here I walk my feet closer together and pedal out my knees a few times before coming up onto my toes and then taking my right leg towards the sky and bending my knee to open up that hip. Trying to keep my shoulders relatively square to the mat just so that the weight grounds down into both hands, and then stepping that right leg forward to the outside edge of my mat, turning the toes out and letting the back knee drop, untucking those toes. So here I'm just looking to get some length into the front psoas, the front hip flexor on the left side, and you'll see me start to dip my right knee out just a little bit to allow my hips to come forward more. This also felt really good in my neck. If you'd like, you can take your right hand to your right knee and open up your chest towards the side of your mat, just rocking onto the outside edge of your right foot. Once you've done that, come back into downward facing dog for a couple breaths. And then take your left leg towards the sky, dropping that left heel towards the left butt cheek, and just really letting that left side open up, keeping those shoulders square to the mat, but letting the hips rotate. And then step your left foot to the outside edge of your left hand, drop your right knee, and from here, let your hips sink down towards the mat. Taking a nice long extension through the back of the neck, the back of the shoulders, and then you'll see that I take my left hand and press it into my left knee, rolling to the outside edge of my left foot. Once again, just taking a few breaths here to just feel what it feels like. From here, stepping back into that downward facing dog, just as a little counterbalance. Speaking of downward facing dog, you'll see my white golden doodle make a few appearances here. That's Koa. She's generally always around when I'm practicing outside. On your next inhale, take your right foot to the sky, step it in between your hands at the top of your mat, and then if you have some blocks, draw them close and frame the front foot. Here, come into an extended pyramid pose. And then if it feels good, I went ahead and did a little revolved pyramid. So sinking back through the left heel, keeping my hips square, and then unwinding. I walk those blocks back towards the top of my mat and then shift my hips back, lift my toes, and then let my knee come forward of my ankle just to sort of do a little dynamic movement here, stretching through the hamstring first, and then stretching through the psoas and the front body. Again, just moving with my breath, allowing everything to come into place as it is, and then finally stepping back into downward facing dog with my hands on the blocks. Taking a moment here to drop off those blocks. On my next inhale, lifting your left leg, stepping it in between your hands at the top of your mat, taking your hands back to frame the foot at the front of the mat, and squaring my hips more towards the floor. Walking that right block in closer towards my foot, and then revolving open to come into that twisted shape. On my exhale, taking my hands back down to the block. And then once again, moving through that dynamic shifting, sinking my hips forward, coming into a high lunge, and then shifting hips back, lifting my toes and stretching through the back of my left hamstring. So this is a really nice way to get the blood flowing, just kind of allowing the body to move, letting the blood flow with your breath, and just sort of enjoying the alternate engagement and stretching that's happening as you move through these poses. When you're ready, turn your blocks down, step back, downward facing dog with your hands on the blocks. And then I went ahead and stepped off those blocks just because they were slipping for me. So if they're slipping for you, just feel free to drop your hands back down to the mat. Take a few breaths here in downward facing dog. And then when you're ready, come back to all fours and come to sit on your knees. So you're kneeling on the mat. Reach forward and grab those blocks if you're so inclined. And you can take them right behind your feet on either their highest setting, their middle setting, or their lowest setting. As you place them there, let your elbows or your hands come back to those blocks, opening up the front body again, opening up those psoas, those little tiny muscles that get real tight when we sit a lot. And then you'll notice that I just turned the blocks down, looking for a little bit deeper of a stretch. When you're ready, come back up slowly, and then take your blocks and move them back to the top of your mat. Next, we're moving into puppy pose. So I have my blocks on my highest setting. I'm letting my heart sink down. It's like a modified child's pose. And here I'm allowing the shape of my bend, my back, to just sort of come into alignment with my arms. From here, come around to sit, and you can take whichever foot you'd like in front. Take one of your blocks and place it in front of your lap, and then drop down and fold forward over your shins, letting your elbows rest on that block. Maybe shake your head from side to side. Take a few breaths, and then when you're ready, come back up. Shift your block off to the side and switch the cross of your legs. And then place that block back in front of your shins. Let your elbows rest. And once again, just fold forward over your legs. And in this case, I took every opportunity to pet the dog. When you're ready, come back up, take your hands to your knees, and slowly begin to do a seated cat-cow. Inhaling to lift the heart and bend back. And on your exhale, rounding through the front body, really taking a lot of curve into the body. Once you've done that just a few times with your breath, you can come off your blanket or your bolster, whatever you happen to be sitting on, and reach over and grab your strap. Make sure that strap already has a loop in it. Place it over your head and wrap it around your low hips. Then take the outside edges of your feet into the loop so that the loop runs along the inside lines of your legs. Tighten that loop just enough so that it draws your feet in towards your midline. And then when you're ready, go ahead and lie back for a little supported Baddha Konasana. Take a few breaths here, just letting the ground support you and hold you. And then when you're ready, reach down to the outside edges of your thighs and close your knees like a book. Unhook your feet, slide the strap off of your body, and then place it off to the left or right of your mat. Next, grab your blocks, and here we're just going to do a couple of little windshield wipers with the knees. So planting the feet on the mat, taking the knees towards the sky. Take an inhale, and on your exhale, drop your knees off to the right. Allow that left thigh to drop and reach down towards the ground. And take a few breaths here. On your next inhale, take your knees back up through center, and exhale to drop your knees over to the left. If you need support under your knees, you can use your blocks or your blanket just to prop up those knees so it doesn't feel nearly as deep in the back. On your next inhale, go ahead and take your knees back to center, plant your feet on the mat, and grab a hold of your two blocks, turning them on their lowest setting. From here, press down into the soles of your feet to lift your hips and slide those two blocks at an angle underneath your pelvis. There'll be space right along the tailbone, so it's almost like your tailbone is dropping down in between the blocks. And here, just let your pelvis relax. Take a few breaths. If you'd like, you can take your hands to your hip points Or if you're feeling like you'd like to open up your chest, you can always take your arms to a cactus pose. A lot of times when my back is bothering me, this is my go-to. On your next inhale, gently reach down to the outside edges of your legs and close your thighs. Ground down through the soles of your feet and lift your hips up and off the blocks. On your next inhale, cross your left foot over your right thigh and flex the soles of your feet, coming into a reclined pigeon or a reclined figure four. On your next exhale, drop the sole of that left foot over towards the right side of your mat and gently drop your gaze towards the left. So you're coming into a reclined, twisted figure four. Let the hips roll, let the pelvis drop towards the earth, and just allow for some space to come into that low back. On your next inhale, shift your knees back to center. Draw that right thigh in towards your face and then uncross your left foot from your right. On your next inhale, crossing your right foot over your left thigh, flex through the soles of your feet, and then draw that left thigh in towards your chest. Take an inhale, and on your exhale, drop the sole of that right foot over towards the left side of your mat, twisting through the body, seeing if you can really drop that right shoulder towards the mat. Maybe taking your hand to that right leg and just pressing it away from your shoulder. Taking a few breaths here. When you're ready, on your next inhale, draw both knees back towards center. And if you'd like, you can cross your ankles and just gently rock from side to side, left to right, allowing the pelvis to sink down. Whichever way you crossed your feet before, uncross them and cross them the opposite way. Grab for your ankles or your shins, and then just gently rock left to right. An alternative to this is sort of a cow-faced leg pose where you cross your right leg over your left at the thighs and reach down for the ankles or the shins, drawing those shins or ankles more towards your shoulders. Once you've done that, cross the opposite direction, so left thigh over right, and then reach down, grab for your shin or your ankle, and draw those shins or ankles towards your shoulders. This is a nice outer hip stretch. Once you've done that, draw your knees into your chest, take a few breaths, and then roll to your side and sit up. For a moment, come back to all fours, and when you're ready, sink your hips back towards your heels. Revisit that child's pose that you did at the beginning of this little sequence. Take a few breaths here. And then when you're ready, start to shift your shoulders more over your wrists, let your hips drop, separate your feet, and just come into a nice, supported, easy cobra. So most people's cobras are much more low to the ground. In this case, I really wanted to go a little deeper, so I'm just letting my pelvis rest and then shifting my hips back, coming into that child's pose once again. Just dynamically moving here to finish up our practice. Taking a few moments just to allow the lower back to release. Thanks for joining me.